Hey guys, real quick, I just want to apologize for the delay. I think it was actually my fault, per usual. I'm still learning how to adjust with sound and volume and everything. So I am going to give everybody a quick second to hop back on. I want to appreciate you, let you guys know that I appreciate you and the time that you've set out for us. And I do just want to reiterate that the whole purpose of today is to talk about overcoming addiction. And that specifically means that I do want to make this in memory of Logan Martin Crabtree, who was a best friend of mine growing up, and then my brother Dustin Lee Reed. They have very different stories, but they're both very powerful. And I hope one day that I do get to tell them a little more in depth. It looks like we've got everybody back, so I'm going to go ahead and bring Jared on. All right. I'm so sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Um, Thanks everybody for your patience. That being said, let's get right back to where we were. So I'm just going to give you a chance to go ahead and reintroduce yourself again and tell your story briefly, if you don't mind.
All right, yeah. My name is Jared Landford. I'm a recovering addict who works in a treatment center, and what I do now for work is try to help people. Pretty much what I always call it is create a GPS to like a road of success in recovery. Right, it's what I tell the patients every time, and I run groups and stuff with them to kind of reiterate that. And yeah, just like as far as like brief stories that I used to live and live to use, and just came from like
Wow.
desperation and despair.
Wow. You made
Yeah,
me laugh because you said that with such a straight face,
yeah,
desperation and despair. There's a lot of people that I feel like live like that. And I think, the main thing that I wanted today to be about was just knowing that addiction doesn't just have to be a drug.
no.
And a lot of people do get confused by that. We all have our own things that we struggle with. We all have our own vices. That being said, do you want to kind of go into depth about what made you start using or what got you to the place that you were at?
Yeah. So it might have something to do with it, but I'm a middle child, and I think that
Me too.
might have like started a little bit of it.
Addicts and recovery unite.
Yeah, my wife is a middle child too. It's just kind of like an epiphany we kind of had, and that's why we're like probably going to just stick with the two kids we have. We
Oh
don't
my goodness.
pre-exposed the newborn we got now, But I struggled with ever feeling like I fit in, like my older brother's 5 years older than me, and then I got a little brother who's just barely under 2 years, and they don't have the same. They don't have They probably do, but they're both in the Navy, and like their stories are far, far different than mine. But I never felt like I belonged, and I remember like really like the first time putting a substance in my body. I think it was like actually like when I was really young. My father knew I was going to have a problem because he gave me a sip of beer, and I thought it tasted like lemonade, and I wanted more. But I remember like the first time I like smoked weed, and I was like, if I could feel like this for the rest of my life, everything will be okay. Um,
Wow.
and and that was like the progression of it. Um, and I moved a lot. Like my biological father was in the Navy, and he got kicked out, and my parents separated and got back together many a times, and they got kicked out because there's a lot of domestic like abuse in the house. Like I watched my parents like beat the crap out of each other a lot of
Wow.
times. Yeah, and like they're both like me, they just haven't ever they don't have recovery in them. So like today I can I accept them, and I'm okay with that piece. But like when you're little and you like see your parents like beating the shit out of each other, you're not just like, you're like, oh, okay, and those just
You
kind
think
of,
it's normal?
yeah. And like, with being in recovery and working in recovery, and you talked about it, like addiction, like it's not just like the substances we put in our body, like there's like other programs that talk about those things more specifically, like growing up in a home with like alcoholic parents and stuff. And
Sure.
like it's okay to lie, like when mom's like, oh, I tripped and fell and this is how I got a black eye, and you're just like, oh, so that's okay, and like certain things like that were just like I was pre-exposed anyway by having my parents like using addicts, but like I've just always like never really felt like I fit in anywhere, you know, like I grew up in, I was born in Detroit, Michigan,
Hmm.
but grew up in Louisiana. Like,
Yikes.
you know, like, yeah, like, and I grew up, I was like on a military base in Louisiana, and that's what, you know, and then when we got kicked out, like when my parents split up and my dad got kicked out of the Navy and everything, we went to live with like my mom's friend, you know, so like nothing was ever stable. And one thing I'm learning as like being like a stepfather is that like kids, like whether they admit it or not, is like they crave like stability, and like they need like real
Children need
ass
structure.
structure and continuity of like a day-to-day life. Like they want to be able to expect the same thing. I grew up never knowing what to expect, you know.
Absolutely.
um yeah, like parents fighting, getting woken up in the middle of the night, my mom's taking me out, like we're going somewhere else, you know, like we're gonna go stay here tonight or something, you know. And like even that translating to like getting older and like realizing that like, oh, my mom's like fucked up, like she's like drunk right now, you know. And that's why things like this are happening, like getting woken up and being like talk shit to and stuff. So I definitely come from a dysfunctional family, and I think that's the real start of it. And like I just remember like talking to my two brothers, they came down whenever I got my first year clean to my like my celebration meeting, and they were like, man, we realized that like you were trying to run away from our problems. And I was like, yeah, man, like the old like just shove that shit underneath the rug, like I found a way to do that. It was fucking narcotics and alcohol, you know. Like that's what I had to do to survive, you know. And then after a while, that those things just didn't work anymore.
Right. And it's really interesting that you say that because I know when I can remember the first time that I ever touched drugs, and I was actually 10 years old. I had tried alcohol when I was 10, and then I got introduced to K-12. I don't know if you know what that is,
Yeah, I remember
but
that.
that was my first introduction to drugs, which later led to an opioid addiction. And through that, I think it's very interesting, especially now where I'm at today and what my passion is, my goals, and losing people that I love and becoming sober. Um, Even when I was preparing for our interview, even though I'm so well versed in addiction in itself, I was like, what do I not know? And I got to realizing and thinking and came to the conclusion that a lot of people don't understand what addiction is. A lot of people, even people that are within addiction and are going through it, they look at it and they view it from the structure of which it's been taught.
Yeah.
And it's been taught wrong. And I found that through not only my own experience with the system and with rehabilitation, but through research. In the 20th century, that's really the early 20th century is where everything got based on addiction. And that was when they took the two rats, they put them, actually, it was one rat, excuse me. They took one rat, they put it in a cage, and they had two water bottles. One water bottle had heroin in it, the other one didn't. What did the rat do? It definitely drank the bottle with the heroin in it.
Yeah.
It didn't touch the bottle without it. And that was the basis of addiction. And that's how we always looked at addiction as this is what it is. And then I don't want to get his name wrong. I have it wrote down somewhere here. Let's see. Professor Alexander in the I guess it was in the 70s, he just started questioning that. He was like, it can't just be that simple. Addiction can't just be people use and everyone that uses becomes addicted. Because in all reality, when your grandmother goes to the hospital and she gets a hip replacement and she's given morphine, that's just medicinal, clear cut heroin. And the street heroin is just cut with something entirely different and honestly has very little heroin in it.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, why isn't grandma a heroin addict? That was the choice that he posed to everyone. So through his studies, he actually said, I'm going to build a rat land. And so he took this study and he put all these things that a rat would love to have: cheese, playgrounds, windmills to play on, partners to not only have sex with, but to build relationships and closeness and family. And you know what he did? He took both water bottles and put them in there. And he found that well under 1% ever touched the water with heroin in it because they had community.
Mm-hmm.
And that was how he based the study of understanding addiction and looking at it in a psychological way. So I find it interesting that as I meet friends and talk to them about addiction, and I ask them, what's your story? What is it that you've been through? It all goes back to structure, community, and bonding. And we're hardwired for that as human beings. And I just found that study so interesting. And then I'll forget their names again. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. Professor Peter Coed, he's actually, I think, from the Netherlands. When I was reading, he actually said, "What if it's more than that? I don't even want to call it addiction anymore. I want to call it bonding because innately we're driven to bond." So if a child is grown up in a havoc environment or doesn't have the support they need or is introduced to drugs early or sexually assaulted, they're 50 times more likely to touch drugs. They're 50 times more likely to have an addiction or suicide, things that need to be prevented. So he said, I'm going to call it bonding because if we don't find something to bond to, like people and groups and friends, we're going to bond to the drugs.
Mm.
And I just found that study so interesting. And I know you work in recovery. So what has that been like?
So first off, I love the rat park thing. That's one of my biggest selling point. Like, not, I guess I want to say selling points, but something that I use often at where I work too, because it's absolutely right. Like, and I always tell, it's like whether you pin yourself an extrovert to introvert, one thing that all humans desire is connectivity. You know, and like, yeah, I'm
Right.
one of so many different stories of like, well, I just never felt like I really fit in,
Yeah.
and that's like where it started from, whether it was me from being the middle child or like I have a buddy who lived his first 10 years in Iran before he came to
Wow.
America, and then like, having to deal with that not fitting in, um, working in treatment's been a blessing. Like, not only like I'm also an alumni of JourneyPure as well. Like I went through that program, and the crazy thing is that like I've worked many different positions since I've been there, and one of the recovery coaches, which is like they call them techs. They're all different names, different places. But I told him when I was a patient, I was like, you know what, one day I'm going to work here. And then I ended up interviewing and hiring him back on to that place a little bit later. And in the interview, he reminded me that, and I was like mind blown. I was like, what?
That is such a beautiful story, though.
Yeah.
And everyone's not fully caught up on how you got there. So I want to dial back real quick and place you in the position where you had gotten arrested and you were in jail and you were like, shit, I've really messed up this time. And here
Uh,
you are. So go from there.
all right. So yeah. Well, I'll just tell you, like, I was on state probation and parole for possession of Schedule 2 with intent to distribute. And it was like narcotics. I got caught with a whole bunch of opiate pills, and I got caught with some cocaine, and I had a lot of money. And I was a very angry little boy. And when I was 18 years old, I thought it would be a good idea to fight the police on the third floor of like the police department, tried to resist arrest. And I went to jail for a really long time, and like something I can never do is pass a drug test, because like I said, I live to use and used to live, and like call myself like a trash can junkie. Like my drug of choice, like, and is what year, because it was always like changing and stuff. But I had violated probation numerous times because I couldn't pass a drug screen, and so like I would either violate or from failed drug tests, or I would run away because I couldn't pass a drug test, and either one got me in trouble both times. And so I sought recovery my first time September 1st, 2013, and I had lived my life with, and I joke about this, but it's like kind of serious. I just wasn't in a band, but sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, like I needed to fill the void that I had inside me with like women, drugs, and like listening to music and like just like I don't know. I was insane. Some people would use the term "throwed off" is what they referred to me as from those who used to know me. But random girl I'd met online, I got her pregnant second day I ever knew her. And I was like, I don't want to be like my parents. And so I went to treatment. And
It was a realization moment.
yeah. And March 1st, 2014, my daughter was a full-term stillborn.
Wow.
And yeah, this is where like how this all like ties in together ends up being really like we're talking about like God's plan and stuff like that, because I can't make this up. So like I bury my daughter in a cemetery in Murfreesboro, right? And I relapsed because I stopped doing the things I needed to do to continue my recovery. And like I call it like spiritual bank. So I wasn't in a community with people trying to get another day clean. I wasn't like talking to a sponsor. I wasn't working on myself at all. I wasn't in conscious contact with a God of my understanding, because I actually blamed him, and like what I felt was, and like part of like the story that was like read about me is like I never felt loved. I never felt like I was able to like give love or receive love, because of how I grew up was like that I didn't really matter that much, and that like everything was a big shit show to begin with. And so I grew up with the belief system that everything was conditional. And
Mm,
so whenever I got this girl pregnant, even though I barely knew her, I thought this was an opportunity for me to give a child something I never had. And then I felt like it was taken away from me. And then that also brought up feelings like, well, you're not good enough to have this. That's why it was taken away from you. And so whenever with her passing, like when I went to the spiritual bank to make a withdrawal to make it through that situation, it said insufficient funds because I wasn't doing anything to help myself.
right.
So I went back to using and failed drug test, went to jail. And then I got back out a little bit later, and I told myself, well, you know what? I never really had a problem with alcohol. And then I caught 2 DUIs within like 2 months of each other, 6 months later from two, and went to jail for a year for that, because when I caught the DUIs, I wasn't reporting to state probation, and when I went to turn myself in, I got violated for not reporting, and I had to serve a year, and I came back out on this intensive parole program, and with less than 90 days, less than 3 months out, I failed a drug test, and the only thing different I did was I didn't run. I kept on reporting. I don't know. That was like my higher power, because that's everything in me is always say, you get up and go. I lived my life like, you got to ride this to the wheels fall off, because they will fall off. Everything was like going to end at one point in time. Wasn't going to
Right.
see, was never going to be, there's no positive outcome that's going to ever happen. And I remember like so many visits in the like county jail. And, this time my probation office, like they didn't want to put my felony sentence into effect, which is what typically happens when you violate with
Right.
them with that parole program. And I just remember like every time we'd go to court from like being in general population in a county jail, there's this thing written on the wall, and it says bad things happen to good people. And I would have to read that every time when I would come from my cell down to booking to go to court. And I remember looking at that, and I was like, we're all pieces of shit, or we wouldn't be here. That's how I believe
That was your
myself to
belief
be.
system.
Yeah. And one day I get brought down there on the day I didn't have court, and they put me in this like interrogation room that I didn't even know existed within the jail. And this guy comes in with like wearing a very like, kind of looking like a lawyer, but not really sure, and it was Dr. Brian Wynn. And he was like, hey man, I have, um, he had, I don't know how many years he has now, but he had enough to make me believe it was that he was lying to me the first time he told me 4.5 years ago, and that he had been in jail too. I was like, you look like you've never been in jail before. And he's telling me, he's like, I was lost. I was like, I had no hope. There's no hope. My heart, like, I didn't even know if I
You
had a
were
heart.
shattered.
I felt like the Grinch, like my heart was like this big, like, um, and he told me that he was going to help me get into treatment because someone gave him a chance and he wanted to give me a chance.
What
And
did it feel like in that moment when he said that to you?
honestly, coming from like my belief system of things being conditional, it was really like, yeah,
What do
okay,
you want from me?
yeah, we'll see, and then a few days later they're letting me out of jail, you
And
know
you were shocked.
and I was like, what? I did, like, I had a court date that day. I never went to court. And then
Wow.
later on that night they're releasing me. and telling me, and then like my lawyer came down and was like, hey, you have to sign these papers and everything. And I was like, okay. So I was like court ordered to go to rehab. And I was like, okay, like I'm cool with that. And I went, and it was so crazy because I didn't know where it was at all. And here we are. My dad's taking a ride onto this road, and I'm like, well, why are we going to the cemetery where my daughter's buried at? And it's right behind it. And I'm just going down this long driveway, and I'm just thinking to
Wow.
myself, well, I guess I have to look at this now, you know?
That was going to be my next question is, while you were incarcerated multiple times, because you did kind of skip over that pretty quickly.
Sorry.
Um, no, you're fine. Did did you get the chance to grieve your child?
No, I never let myself do
You
that,
didn't allow
actually.
yourself.
Yeah, I mean, like, they talk about the 5 stages of grief. I think the last thing that ever came was acceptance, and that didn't come until 2000, and like her birthday, what would have been her birthday, March 1st, 2018, and that was because of the community that I involved myself in.
So there you are, coming down the road after just being released from prison
Yeah,
and thinking that there's some conditional thing going on, and you had no clue there was something conditional going on because God wanted you to face that.
yeah, that was crazy.
God wanted you to heal, and that is just wild. We were talking about this earlier before we went live, and I think that's one of those conditional things that fit into it when I was telling you about when I went through my rape trial. And
Yeah,
I was so disheartened and I was ready to give up. And I just said, I don't want to go to trial. I'm done. I want to be free. I want to be void of it.
yeah,
He went to jail, and I'm checking the mail at my home. I just signed my lease on, and I look over, and the son of a bitch is parked in the driveway next to me. I had moved in next to my rapist's mother, and because he was on parole, he had to live there. He didn't have anywhere to go. So for every single day for a year, I saw that man. And instead of looking for treatment and help, I receded inward. And I'm grateful for that moment looking back now, though, because I think the universe said, you're going to have to face it. And,
yeah,
and I find that so relatable because I experienced that and it was gutting and terrifying. And I'm sure in that moment you were like, what the hell did I just sign up for?
yeah,
So you're riding down the driveway and then you pull up and what is this place?
yeah. It's JourneyPure, man, and it's I was like, okay, and um it was so crazy. I actually see her for therapy now, but like the therapist that was working in a detox unit, since I was in jail, I didn't have to actually go through a detox, but there's still a process with checking in. And like you kind of get like a little physical, like meet with the doctors and they check everything to make sure you're okay. And I was just having a little conversation with her, with this therapist, and she said, "You know what, Jarrett, you're pretty smart." And I said, "Well, thank you." She said, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And I was like, I'm an addict. I don't know what you want me to say, but I check in. They go through all my luggage and they bring me up to the houses where the men stay, and like the facility was so small back then, like, and it's huge now in comparison to how big it was back then, but this residential manager, the guy who he was the manager of the recovery coaches who kind of like stayed and like worked in the houses and with the clients, he says like, hey, we do things a lot differently here than you've probably ever seen at other treatment centers, and if you left yourself have an open mind and take what you need, there's a guard shack at the beginning of the driveway. You can throw everything you don't need in there on the way out, and I think you'll be surprised with the results that you get. I kind of took that as like, I'm a very competitive person. So I was like, okay, we'll see about this, and like, we did like yoga. I used to think that was hippie bull crap. I actually love yoga, and like, the therapist I ended up
Chakras are
having.
real, my friend.
Yeah, no,
The
it's,
emotional energy is real.
yeah, I'm completely opposite of that today. Like, I was like, yeah, all right, whatever. I even got into like an argument with my therapist over that too. But like my therapist was like super holistic Buddhist type style dude. We'd have to sit in a yoga sitting stance and whisper in our process groups and everything. But I got a lot out of it. We did so many different things, and it was like we focused on recovery like stuff. So we did like 12-step work, and we did a lot of like therapy work. and it helped me out a lot. And that's whenever that was the beginning part of me realizing about like the unconditional love part, and how much not knowing that that was something that I was allowed to have played such a tremendous role on everything that I did, you
Right.
know? And it's so crazy to me. Like, I didn't really like him, but like he helped me out through that. Like, I ended up writing a poem to my daughter about unconditional love, and took my favorite RC and him, and we walked over to where she's buried at, and I like got to read it and leave it there for her. And that was like the start of healing. But
That was a
there's no,
moment of release.
yeah, there's no like timetable on grief. But like when I'm using substances, like I do that to repress my emotions. I don't like the way I feel. That's why I
Right.
used, because I didn't like the way I felt, you know? And I loved how you touched earlier on like it's not about the substances, because like that's really a band-aid solution, you
Right.
know, along with the many other like coping skills that I had picked up along the way that were really just ways to protect myself, because when it boiled down to it, I was just a scared little boy, you know.
Right.
And being like a scared little boy, and you're like 18 to early 20s, comes out a lot of times in anger. So like
It does.
I was super angry the whole time I was there. I was angry. And a lot of times today people are like, I wouldn't imagine you being an angry person. But I hated
Anger is
every
repressed hurt.
yeah. And like what it was I hated myself. I hated what I'd gone through in life up to that point. And so I like had a mirror on me. So I didn't really treat everybody else that great, because they were a reflection of myself, if that makes sense. Like, so I was just always mean. Like, I had someone tell me one time after I'd only had a few months clean at the time, but they're like, Jared, it's so crazy. I'd see you like be so mean to everybody, like out when we were out and stuff. And when you get home, you would be so hard on yourself. Like, you're like a shell of a man. And like, so it's like, that was a really cool moment for me. It was like, oh man, like I'm actually getting to like figure out who I am, you know? And that's been the greatest gift that I've gotten in recovery, is like figuring out who I am and like becoming that.
Right. Because within addiction, it's a mask. Like you
Yeah.
said, it's a band-aid. And um, I know when I got into 20s, and your wife and I were talking about this earlier when I met her, we both said, we're here and we think we're behind. And you go through this fear, whether you're raised in trauma or, like you said, a non-structural home, and then you get into your 20s and you're like, whoa, I can't believe I made it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shocked that I've gotten it this far. And you spend your whole life in survival mode. When I was being raped at 11 years old and I didn't feel like I could tell anybody, I was in survival mode because I wanted to protect my family from hearing those things. And then I was afraid even if I did tell them, they wouldn't believe me.
Yeah.
So then that's where the addiction came into play, and I started using, and then I was like, this feels better. But that put me in situations to get raped again, and that's what happened. And now that I'm here, and I'm so fortunate that I've made it this far. I literally remember waking up when I had done an extensive amount of therapy, and I'm still in therapy. And I said, I don't know what to do now. I'm so shocked that I'm here. I was in survival mode for so long. Here I am, and I have the opportunity to be an adult, and I have no skills. I don't know how to process my emotions. I don't know how to process my anger. I'm just, and I realized in my therapy, my therapist told me, he was like, I can feel your anger from here. And you're trying to tell me you're not angry, but you are. And that's where the resentment and the pain really breeds anger. And I think that really makes me want to draw back to the point of, when I was talking about the rats in the cage, and he said, I don't think it's addiction in itself. I think it's the isolation. It's not the cage. It's not the drugs. It's where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start looking at isolation and we start looking at self-loathing and being an addiction and support and society and what we do, and you're in treatment, so you work with people coming into recovery every day. The first thing that you push is what? A support system.
Mm-hmm.
You say, do you have somebody outside of here when we establish care that is going to support you? And I think so many, and I'm not really talking about teens, but adults here that come out of recovery or don't even get to get into it, it's because they don't have support.
Yeah.
And do you feel that way?
Yeah, that's like the first time I'm like with what I do in my department and meet with patients, I'm like, where are you returning when you go home? Who are you going to live with? Is that a safe and sober environment? And if the answers are no, I'm like, well, we're going to find you one, you know?
Right.
And sometimes it's not all they, sometimes they say yes and it's still no, but yeah, that's so important. Like now go back to me being in treatment. The recommendations was for me to like continue treatment at an IOP level of care, like intensive outpatient, which is what,
Hmm.
and they wanted me to do sober living. And like I said, I was a very angry, very resistant to change. And I told the person that was in my position when I was a patient to fuck off. So I'm not doing your stupid IOP. I'm not going to your sober living house, you know. But that's another thing, like being guarded and doing things my way. But then, like at some point in time when I was in treatment, I realized like, well, doing things my way got me in jail and rehab, which is like not what you go to because you're on a winning streak in life.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I'll go to your stupid halfway house in your IOP, you know, a sober living house. And I did that. And so what that put me in, it put me in a house with other people, other dudes trying to do the same thing as me, which is get just another day clean, you know. And then I continued learning like coping skills and like tools that I need to like deal with people, you know, because like I
Right.
was institutionalized. I've been in jail like at up to that point, I'd probably spent maybe 6 months to a year total from 18 to 24 not incarcerated,
Wow.
you know,
And
in and
that was
out,
when
in
your
and out.
brain was developing the most path, as
Yeah,
far as your frontal cortex and everything.
yeah,
Wow. So with being institutionalized and coming out of that, did you have any type of unrealized trauma from being institutionalized?
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that it was. I knew what it was, you know. Like I wasn't like okay. Like I'd seen so one time like while in jail, I'll just say it's like, and it's crazy how I reacted back then versus if I would have witnessed this now. But like I was going to borrow coffee from a guy I'd made friends with in his cell. He's like, yeah, just go up to my door and whenever they buzz them, you go in there and get you some. Um, and I when the door buzzed, I popped it open and his like cellie had hung himself.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
like he was dead when he was like by the time when I opened the door. Like I just like kind of stared at him for a long time, you
You were in
know. And
shock, yeah.
I was just like, no shit. And then I went and told the trustee. I was like, hey, this guy hung himself, you know. Like now I feel like I would have been like trying to do something about it, but I was just like, oh well, he hung himself. I should need to go tell somebody. Like it was just like so robotic of like my actions and everything. And like I said, with believing that I was like a piece of shit. So like any situation I'd put myself in, you know, like I sold drugs too. I mean, that's what my charges were. I was selling drugs, you know. So like um putting myself in situations that could harm me or where I have harmed others, like that was just uh it is what it is, you know. And like I know that, and I always was aware that like this is fucked up, but it's like, well, this is what I'm subjected to. This is who I am. This is the type of life I'm supposed to live. That's how it's going to be, you know. Even more shockingly, like the only reason why I got to go to treatment in 2013 is it's called an adult adoption. My best friend from high school's uncle adopted me and helped like got me on his insurance and sent me into treatment. And then like
Wow.
yeah, like from my time that my parents split, it never was a thing. But one of the times I was in jail, this kind of helped with my belief system. My biological father came and visited me, and he told me that my little brother had told him that I was in jail, and he just wanted to make sure that it was true because he always knew that I would either end up dead or in jail for the rest of my life.
When he said that internally, what was your self conversation?
I know that it was like, even though part of me, like, even though that's how I thought, like, it still hurt me so much, you know? And I just remember looking at him, and I was like, well, thank you for coming to visit me. And I
The
walked
fear of
out.
your self thoughts and what you believe people thought he made you believe in the
Yeah.
moment when he said it, the one person you were hoping would accept you didn't.
Yeah. And that's like another thing with like you hear people talk about like little T's. So like I have a much better relationship with my mother now than I have ever probably. But she used to say things like, you remind me of your father. And like I did not like my father. And those are like little trauma moments, like
Right,
she'd call me like little Mitch Jr., like, like, and like fuck you. Like my mom, like that's how like my mom communicated a lot, and I understand now is like she's sick how I was sick.
right.
And so, and like that doesn't like necessarily justify it, but it's like, you know what? Like I'm not gonna, like you talk about resentments. Like I'm not gonna live. I can't move forward in life if I'm always looking behind me. So like I can't let that bring me down anymore. That doesn't match who I am today. It doesn't match how I believe myself to be. So I'm not gonna let it affect me today. But like I lived a long time believing like I was a piece of shit from a very
What
young
do you
age.
believe you are now? What do you
I
tell
believe
yourself
that.
now?
Uh,
What's your self talk like now?
um. So I still have fears, but I'll tell you
Oh
that.
God, you're human.
Yeah, I know, and I'm the hardest person on myself with these fears. But like, so some of the things I wanted the most in life was to be a husband and a father, and like I'm both of those things, you know. And so like
Yeah,
those are my biggest fears is like I'm not being am I a good enough husband or like am I being a good dad. But like I'll have to reinforce those things. And what's great about having like my wife being in recovery too, we kind of like help each other with that, like and she reminds me a lot of times, but a lot of the talk I'm like, you know what, I'm a I'm a man, like it's like
I'm a good father.
I'm a good father, like you know so one of the things that I was told in recovery is that I can like stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. And like that's what I get to do. And like finding a new way to live is like ever changing for me as I continue to stay clean and like experience new things. Like my like a 1 month old baby, if he smiles, it's probably because he's about to shit himself. And so he's just making faces. He doesn't really know what's going on. But now when I'm like, dad, and he smiles, I'm like, yeah, that's right. Like he knows who his dad is. And like getting to experience those things. I'm like, oh man, I'm so happy that like I get the opportunity to be a father and like experience these things with them. And like materialistic things don't really matter. But then I like to call, my bonus son, which is the 9-year-old. I call him bonus son. He's not like my stepson, like I'm more of a father to him than anybody is, and like getting the opportunity to teach him like one of the most important things I think that like young boys should know, and that's like respect women. And like what did your mom tell you? Like you don't talk to your mother like that, and like being a big reinforcement to her and like letting him know, like I had to let him know when he hurt my feelings. Like a month ago, he hurt my feelings, and I was like, "Hey, I have to let you know that you hurt my feelings."
That's
I'm like
amazing.
being able. No man ever told me that I hurt their
Right.
feelings growing up, and I'm pretty sure that there was plenty of instances where I've done that. Like, and so being able to teach them that it's okay to talk about how you feel.
Absolutely.
And those
And
those
I
are
think
like,
that stems right back to not only the middle child syndrome,
yeah,
but just being raised in a household where you are reinforced by action rather than communication.
yeah,
Because that's how my household was too. And I find more and more as I step not only into recovery, but acceptance, that the ability to look someone in the face and say, you hurt me,
yeah,
you let me down, and now I'm hurt and I'm angry.
yeah,
And to be able to say that, there's power within that, just like there's power within forgiveness. And, I do want to circle back to the topic of, oh man, just how broken the system is. I know you're working so tirelessly. Your wife also works in, does she work at JourneyPure as well?
yeah,
So she works in marketing. With where you work now, and you think about the teenage boy that you were at 18 years old, an addict, unhappy, miserable, going through losing a child, incarceration. Whoa, your testimony is powerful. What is the biggest message that you would give to an addict right now that's watching this?
Ask for help because it is out there, you know. And like, I honestly believe that with everything I've ever experienced slash done, that that allowed myself to build the the false identity that I had, that like the same goes for you. Like those things can change. You know, you can, there's still enough time. You can become the person that you want to be, you know?
Right.
Um, and like, you deserve the opportunity to. It's like you deserve an opportunity for more.
Wow. And I think I had to have that self-talk too. I still have to have that self-talk because I had been sober for a few years, and when I lost my brother 6 months ago, uh, you know, when I closed the casket and I was standing next to my mom and his wife, I was so gutted and I felt so pissed off and let down. And there are so many feelings that you feel when you have to close the casket on someone that did not deserve it.
Yeah.
And which no one deserves to go out like that, whichever way it is as a young adult. There was just so much anger within me, and I 100% relapsed. And it's I think there's so much shame wrapped within addiction. There's a stigma within society, this belief that if we ask for help, we're weak. And I just remember when I closed the casket, I knew I closed the casket on myself. I remember telling myself, I was like, I'm done. I'm cutting off my feelings. I'm not going to progress any further. I'm going to give up on every aspiration, all the work that I put in because he's not here anymore. I was pissed off. And I found myself just binge drinking and starting to mess with opioids again. And I literally had Anthony give me a call, which is starter and owner of Be the Change. And he was like, I know that there is something within you that has the ability to be great, and you're absolutely running from it because you're afraid that it might actually be there.
Oh yeah.
You're afraid that if you allow yourself to feel, if you allow yourself to speak and walk in who you are, that it's actually possible. And I think when you come from trauma and you come from addiction, you tell yourself, oh my God, what if I am worth more than this? What if all my self-talk my whole life isn't a fucking lie? And what if that means that I'm capable of something great?
Yeah.
And it's so wild that we're so conditioned to stay in addiction and stay in the fear that we'll allow ourselves to be miserable. We'll allow ourselves to be in pain. And when he said that to me, I was like, no, fuck this. I don't want to be an ad. I don't want my mother to have to close the casket on me too.
Mm.
The second that you hear a mother sob over their child because of something like that, it's gut wrenching.
Yeah.
And that moment will stick with me until the day that I die. And it's a constant reminder of who I need to be, that I have to have expectations for myself. And I just want to say, one thing specifically before we do open for questions, and that is that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is community and connectivity and support and love. And there's a big stigma around that. And I want to thank you sincerely for having the courage that day to say, why not? In the beginning, it may have came from a selfish place because it's came from a selfish place for me too. Do you want to be in jail or do you want the opportunity to get out?
Right.
And little did you know that the universe was dragging you to not only face the loss of your daughter, but face your addiction. And within JourneyPure, you found your spouse, you
Yeah.
found fatherhood, and you honored yourself. And now you're saving lives. And I want to thank you for that because you inspire me. I literally 2 weeks ago was scrolling across Facebook and I was like, who am I going to have on the show? And I've never met your wife in my life, and she's on my timeline, and I'm reading your story, and I'm like, It's going to be him. It's going to be him. I'm going to message this stranger, and I'm going to have this guy on my show because someone needs to hear his story. And I think the quicker that we open ourselves up to possibility, the easier it is to not only let go of the shame, but to believe that there's a tomorrow. And I know what it's like not to believe that there's a tomorrow. And I just want to, again, thank you for what you've done and the courage to not only talk about it, but talk about it like a casual conversation. That being said, guys, I am going to open the window up for any type of questions you guys might have for Jared or what he does, where he works. He is based in Middle Tennessee, which is where I live, so it's hilarious that we've
Yeah.
connected. It's just wild. That being said, I am more than likely going to have his wife on very soon because she is also a recovering addict, and now they're a duo. So we may do an interview from the perspective of two spouses working together towards sobriety, because I'm sure that's interesting sometime. That being said, I guess the last thing that I'll ask you really is if we don't have any questions, what would you say to yourself if you could have seen yourself 4 years ago? What would be the thing that you would say to yourself?
I think most importantly, I'd give myself a hug because, like, I don't know if there's so much power behind a hug, but like, something that I tell myself, even when we go through troubling situations now, is that like this might not be okay, but it's gonna be okay. Like, like just like have some faith and trust the process. Um, yeah, most importantly, yeah, it's like it's
You're
okay.
gonna
Like,
make me cry. No, man. There's power within that, and there's power within a man that honors his feelings. That I can't wait to see how wonderful you raise your children.
oh no, stop! You're gonna make me cry now.
I'm so proud of you, honestly. I so wish my brother could have met you. It gives me hope and belief that there's possibility. And I'll end this show how I always do, and that is to everyone that has questions about Questions Unraveled, know this. We are not your typical All-American Picket Fence podcast. We talk about shit that no one's going to like. We talk about things that are going to make you uncomfortable. And we ultimately look to not only save lives, but change them. So if you are inspired in any way by this or need to have conversations with Jared himself and you're in the Middle Tennessee area, we will provide you with the help that you need to get you to safety and the ability to lay the shame down. So that being said, to the self that is yet to exist, that is what I tell myself every day. I hope you guys go into this week by saying to the self that is yet to exist, because there is hope beyond addiction. Let's see. I've got one question. What if you're so afraid of being sick, Jared?
The sickness is only temporary. Something that was told to me one time by an old timer was like, you only have to get it once. So yeah, we detoxing from like hard drugs and alcohol is extremely real, and it's extremely uncomfortable. And treatment centers, like that's why they have doctors and nurses there. Those things help you. You're looking to get better. You're not looking to like coast through it. So it's gonna be uncomfortable. But it's only temporary. Like I don't like any time that I've had experienced withdrawal, like yeah, I was sick for a little bit, but I'm not sick today, like at all. Like
You're
it's not something
thriving.
I don't have to worry about that, like I don't have to be afraid of the sun when it comes through the window. I don't have to be afraid of like, am I going to be able to make it home okay without crashing my car or getting pulled over? Like those things definitely outweigh it. Like, oh, I get to wake up every day and enjoy life. Like yeah, I've experienced withdrawals many times, and I've had to go through withdrawal in jail many times. So they don't help you
Not
like the
fun.
same way. Yeah, you don't get like the same treatment that you get like going into a rehab coming off of heroin, that if you're in jail. It's not the same. They're like,
Right.
oh, here's some Tylenol. You know.
What you just said reminded me. Each week I read a book. Well, I audio listen to it because I work full time and I do the podcast and everything like that. That being said, this week the book was Unfuck Yourself. It's an amazing book. challenge you guys to read it, pick it up. But what you said was really interesting to me because within that book, he's an Irish dude or Scottish. Let me not mess that up because they're super particular about that. And I'm listening to him talk, and he said, I'm not going to tell you every day that you need to look in the mirror and tell yourself you're a tiger. Like, I'm not going to do that, or do that inner self-talk. I'm going to ask you, what are you willing to do?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, it all is a choice. If you're overweight, if you have a pornography addiction, if you have an alcohol addiction, if you're, gossiping, whatever it is that you're dealing with that is a demon within itself, and you say, I want to stop doing it. I want to stop being fat. I want to stop being an addict. I want to stop talking badly about people when they're not around me, but I just can't help it. No, you're not willing. And I think that's the first step in any type of breaking of chain is saying, what are you willing to do? You say
Yeah.
you want it. Are you willing to do everything it takes? And I think that circles back to the question, what if you're afraid of being sick? What are you willing to go through to get through the better days, to get to the good days like you've gotten to, being a father, being a spouse, falling in love with yourself because that's what every one of us deserves. And I'm gonna wrap because of course we've ran over because I just can't help myself.
Yeah.
So I'll leave you with this, guys, and Jared as well. What are you willing to do? Are you willing to make the choice to change your life? Just like Ashley said, so proud of this guy. I pray everyone and anyone with addiction gets help and overcomes it. This is actually my sister-in-law. She
Oh.
lost my brother, and this is very a special episode because this is the first time that we've talked about addiction in this way. And I'm grateful for you, and I hope to talk to you soon. And guys, we will see you next week. We are heading out. It's